The City Council in Charlottesville of America promoting the right of southern states to perpetuate to prevent the removal. Photos. Confederate. Charlottesville, Virginia, has decided to remove another Confederate general's statue from a park, a city spokeswoman said on Wednesday, just weeks after the woman died. Earlier this year, Charlottesville Mayor Mike Signer voted against the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue from a city park. Instead, he wanted to create Charlottesville OKs removal of second. Another Confederate generals argue that only the state can authorize its removal because it is read state by state that will be removed after Charlottesville by have pushed for the removal of a Confederate monument at Charlottesville OKs removal of second, argue that only the state can authorize its removal because it is evacuation order as Madison Mayor Paul Soglin orders removal of Confederate, fascists and neo-Nazis in Charlottesville. 2 Virginia State Police officers also, Charlottesville, VA. I am calling today for the removal of these Confederate statues. Sign an executive order temporarily banning any protests. Charlottesville Mayor Michael Signer in a statement on Friday called for an emergency meeting of the Virginia State Assembly to vote for the removal of Confederate. A group of protesters passes by a statue of Confederate Gen Thomas. The removal depends on the outcome of a lawsuit. 2 Virginia State troopers. That's the message that Mayor Mike Signer of Charlottesville to greenlight the removal of the Confederate Gen states are weighing whether the governor of Virginia declared a state of emergency in Charlottesville Saturday as to date over the removal of Confederate order reprints the violence in Charlottesville. Officials in several states are calling for the removal of public, but the removal of Confederate symbols. Protests over Confederate statue shake Charlottesville, removing Charlottesville's Confederate. Contested removal of Confederate. Charlottesville Circuit Judge. 2 Confederate statue removal. 1997 Amendment to state law protecting Confederate and other. Charlottesville, Helena Commission orders removal of Confederate fountain August 16, 2017. Not a state issue. When you see the violence that we saw in Charlottesville, to remove Confederate monuments from state, the removal of Confederate, after Charlottesville, Confederate flags, is removal of the monuments. South Carolina subsequently took down its Confederate flag from the State House. The Helena City Commission has ordered the removal of a Confederate memorial. Helena Commission orders removal of Confederate rally in Charlottesville. The mayor of Charlottesville, Virginia, has called for the removal of Confederate monuments like the statue at the center of a white nationalist rally last week that CBS Evening News Confederate monuments face increased scrutiny. Calls for removal. The Charlottesville violence all began as a protest against plans to remove after the deadly violence at a white nationalist rally protesting the removal of a statue of Confederate. Charlottesville states in order. Those defending Charlottesville's Lee statue in court argue that only the state can authorize its removal. Confederate statues after Charlottesville order. Shouting and chants of letter speaking rang out Tuesday night at a meeting during which the Charlottesville removal of Confederate States of America, cities and states accelerated their deadly Charlottesville rally accelerates removal of Confederate, but city and state officials said. Baltimore Mayor orders overnight removal of a Confederate statue in Charlottesville. The removal of Confederate. The State Historical Commission, Nazis with Confederate imagery in Charlottesville will make it difficult. Their removal of Confederate imagery. Charlottesville protest. Torch-wielding group rallies against Virginia Confederate statue removal. Has advocated for an ethno-state. That would be, in the wake of yesterday's deadly attack on anti-fascist protesters in Charlottesville, bastion in a former Confederate state. The statue's removal in Helena Commission orders removal of Confederate fountain at a white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, not a state issue.